Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Food Loss and Waste Day in the Food Systems Pavilion. We're glad to have you here. Our first session of the day talked about the opportunity to reduce methane emissions through a focus on food loss and waste, and mentioned throughout the session was the importance of the policy environment. And so we are thrilled to have such an esteemed set of speakers to be talking about this particular issue. For the next hour. My name is Lisa Moon. I lead the Global Food Banking Network, and just want to give a quick minute on some of the work we have been doing with the Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic exactly on this topic. So in 2018, we launched a partnership to look at food loss and waste frameworks by country. And to date, we've done analyses across 25 countries and counting. And what we have found through this is that there has been a significant uptick in government action on food loss and waste really since 2014. And just to give you a sense of that, since 2014, 9 countries have passed major legislation on food loss and waste frameworks that did not have them previously. 8 countries have prioritized liability protection for donors, producers and donors that want to be donating surplus food as opposed to discarding it or landfilling it. 7 countries have established food safety regulations for specifically for surplus product. And 7 countries have implemented food waste deterrence policies. And that's even just since 2017. And so the policy environment is very active, and we anticipate we're going to see a lot of this in the months and years ahead. So I'd like to kick off this session by welcoming Tom Arnold. He's going to give some brief remarks. Tom is the chair of Food Vision 2030, Ireland's agri-food strategy to 2030, and we are also very fortunate that he is a member of our board of directors. Tom, please.
Lisa, thank you very much. As you say, I'm on the board for the last year, and it's been a very rapid learning curve. And what have I learned? I've learned that the board of Global Food Banking Network is a highly effective board. I've had a chance to visit 2 assemblies, a global assembly in Mexico in March of food banks, and a European assembly in September in Madrid. And there I got a deeper sense of, the nature of this movement. And it seems to me that it's characterized by highly professional leadership, supplemented by an extraordinary level of personal commitment of the volunteers. And when you get that mixture, it adds up to what I would call a magic mixture. And I've also seen food banks in practice in Ireland in the shape of Food Cloud, who were on the first panel. And I've seen again the very great effectiveness of it. So that's all I want to say by way of introduction. I think we have 2 excellent panels ahead of us, and they are going to be moderated by Danny Nierenberg, president of Food Tank, who's a constant inspiration for many people in this field. Danny, over to you.
Complex for me. Thanks again to Tom. Thanks again to the Global Food Banking Network. I am Lisa Moon's biggest fan, so it is a huge honor for me to be here with you all today. Again, I am Danny Nierenberg, president and co-founder of Food Tank. We're a research and advocacy organization really devoted to highlighting stories of hope and success in food and agriculture systems. Food loss and food waste has been a huge part of the work that we do. We're so delighted to be able to highlight the Global Food Banking Network and so many other wonderful organizations who are doing great work. So I am excited to really discuss how policy at the global, national, regional, and local levels can reduce food loss and food waste. And I want to share some statistics. I know we all know these, but it's always good to be on the same page, right? So as we all know, 1/3 of food is lost or wasted every year. And experts predict that that amount will increase by 2% per a year to 2030 at least. Food waste contributes 20% of global methane emissions, making it such a key contributor to greenhouse gas emissions that we have to do something, and we have to do it now. What's really, really exciting to me, and always has been about the food loss and food waste situation, is that there are so many exciting solutions, right? Through opportunities to prevent waste and loss, through policy and investment, and through different kinds of practices. Today's conversation will be broken into two parts. The first will address the global policy perspective, and the second will look at translating that global action into national and regional action. So I'd like to invite our panelists to join me, and you can just take your seats, and I'll introduce you once you're up here. Great. So it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce somebody I've known for many years and have long admired, and that's Shenggen Fan, the chair professor of the College of Economics and Management at the China Agricultural Institute and the former director general of IFPRI, the International Food Policy Research Institute. At the end, we have Christy Lopez, the director of environmental programming at the Robertson Foundation. Welcome. And Craig Hansen, somebody I've admired for a long time, the Managing Director of Programs at the World Resources Institute. Thank you all so much for being here today. Give them a round of applause. Let's keep the energy going as much as possible. So I'd love to start with Shenggen, because I've known you the longest. When you were Director General of IFPRI, you and your colleagues recognized that a food systems approach was necessary to solving food loss and food waste and really transforming our food systems into one that provide food security instead of food insecurity. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that research that IFPRI did at the country level and why gaining that data was so important.
Thank you. I think this is a great opportunity to share some of the thoughts with me. So in addition to my work at IFPRI for the last three and a half, almost 4 years in China, I gained new insights and probably new thinking on particularly national level, how we can really transform food systems. I think food banking must be part of the solution. So at a global level, as Danny said, our food systems are broken. I think you actually used my words, the system is broken. Yes, 800 million people are still hungry. But equally important is probably 2 billion people suffer from lack of micronutrients. Not just simply calorie intake, but more importantly, micronutrients, iron, zinc, vitamin, and so on. So more than 2 billion people suffer from that. Another challenge is overweight obesity. Again, 2 billion people in my own country, more than half of the people now either overweight or obese. It's a serious problem for a Chinese like me, could you imagine? Now, obviously, climate change. Danny said that 1/3 of greenhouse gas emission is from our agri-food system. So how do we make that shift towards low carbon, nutritious, healthy, and resilient food systems? In 2021, Global Food System Summit was held in New York. Many countries, actually, firstly, NGOs, civil society, more than 200 of them committed to, let's say, to work on food system transformation. And equally important is the countries. So I think more than 120 countries committed themselves to transform food system, including China. China actually made several concrete commitments, including investment in R&D, including reducing food waste and loss. By the way, China actually has done a pretty good job on reducing food waste and loss. Probably one of the first countries to legislate, to introduce a legislation to reduce food waste and loss. And always South-South cooperation. So here we have lots of people from Africa, from Latin America. I think South-South cooperation will be so critical. Now, so how do we move forward from here? I think the food banks are so critical. It's a win-win. On the one hand, we know that lots of people still suffer from hunger, malnutrition. Yeah, let's say in urban centers, in food desert areas, in big metropolitan cities and also in remote, let's say, rural areas. So how do we get food to them? So that's one. The second, there are lots of food companies who are ready to dump, to get rid of the foods. So how can we really make sure that all these foods ready to be dumped can be used to help the poor and hungry people? And equally important is to reduce carbon emissions. You already said 1/3. If the emissions from food system is a country, is the third largest, that's from WI, from Craig's work. I always like the killer chart. I still try to learn from the killer chart. So 8 to 10% of greenhouse gas emission is from food waste. It's a big emissions. So now the policy, I'm a researcher working on food policy. I think number one is countries must recognize the importance of food banks in feeding people, in building that's a healthy, resilient, sustainable food system. That's important, must be recognized. Second, policy. Can we, let's introduce certain policy to support food banks and to, let's make sure that if the food banks reduce carbon emissions, they got to be compensated through carbon markets. We are working on that as a researcher to monitor, to track the greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture, from rice, from livestock. I think equally important is from reducing food waste loss. If we do have a correct measure, then I think they should be compensated. I will stop over here. I have more things to offer.
Well, I have
but I
a
know.
follow-up for you as well. Can people hear me? Sort of.
No?
Dana's saying no. Thank you.
You can hear me, right?
It is working? Okay, here we go. So, Shengyan, you brought up a great point that, there are policies that are needed to support food banks. What kinds of policies are necessary to really support food banks in different countries?
Yeah, okay. Right now, around the whole world, probably 500 to 800 billion dollars are used to subsidize water, pesticides, chemical fertilizer to produce more rice, wheat, and maize. And these subsidies are not sustainable. They do not produce healthy, nutritious foods. So can we repurpose them to support some of the more sustainable, healthy food production or consumption, including support food banks? So I think this is so critical. And then, as I said, can we use the carbon markets? So if certain food banks help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, they should be compensated. I think the carbon prices needs to be raised right now. In many countries, like in China, the price is too low. Nobody has any incentive to reduce carbons. So I think that's supposed. The third one, I think the public finance should also support, let's say, the citizens movement to reduce food waste and loss, and probably through food banks or through other. And if I donate sort of money to food banks, probably I would benefit from some sort of reduced tax. And so far, like in China, I still don't benefit from that.
Sure.
If I do, let's say, make a contribution to food banks, nothing, no incentive at all.
Right.
Maybe even more troublesome.
Right. Thank you so much, Shengyan. I love what you said about carbon markets, which I think we'll hear about in the second part of this conversation today. And also this idea of repurposing subsidies to help food banks. That's a wonderful, wonderful thing that could happen. So thank you for all of that. Craig, I want to turn to you. WRI, the World Resources Institute, has been such a leader for so many years on making, the research available that's needed for policy makers to make better decisions around food loss and waste. In 2013, you released the report Reducing Food Loss and Waste, which was groundbreaking. Thank you so much for doing that. I think we should give Craig a round of applause, please, because so many of us.
That was 10 years ago, which is kind of scary, just saying.
So many of us depend on that work, though, to this day. So thank you for that. I'm wondering, one of the things that you have been doing is collecting, that crucial data for how countries plan their nationally determined commitments. And I'm wondering, what those look like when we're talking about preventing food loss and waste.
So I'm glad that we actually have Amanda McKee here from the NDC Partnership. Raise your hand. I'm looking at you right now. This is something we've actually talked about a lot, right? Amongst WRI, our peers with the World Bank and with NDC Partnership is, because, Shengyan's right, because food loss and waste plays such a big role, not only for food security, but also in terms of climate. why can't we then get countries to put reductions in food losses, reductions in food waste into their NDCs? That at least gets to start, that it's on the agenda, to then get in the capital cities of the planet thinking through, okay, well then what then are the policies and programs we put in place to actually do that, right? And I think we started off with a less than 10. I think we might be in the teens now of countries that have reference to food loss and food waste. But there's a last count, there's like 180, 200 countries on the planet, something like that. I think it's incumbent upon all of us here to work with our respective countries where you work to engage them, get them engaged in the NDC partnership. I know the NDC partnership itself is thinking through how do we get these on the agenda. I think it's as a de minimis first step, right?
Yeah.
Because it does it therefore gets on the agenda, and then all the things Shengen talked about can become something on here. So
Right.
I do think we need to get more of that.
Well, I mean, I think that leads me to my next question. Why does food loss and food waste continue to be sort of the untapped solution? We always call it the low-hanging fruit, but it's still untapped in many ways.
So my experience on this is I think that people think it's hard to deal with, right? Unlike electric vehicles, there's a silver bullet, the electric vehicle, right? And people can rally around that. How do you deal with coal and natural gas? Well, there's solar, wind, there's a handful of things. There's a silver bullet out there. But at least in my experience of food loss and waste, it's a lot of different things. Food leaves the food system at various points for various reasons across an entire supply chain. It's death by 1,000 cuts. But there's no one singular solution to that. So I think it's incumbent upon us, though, to show decision makers in governments, in financial institutions, in companies that, yes, there's lots of sources, but there is a way to think about it. There are solutions. So getting success stories out there is important. There are a few things that actually, they're not silver bullets, but they're big buckshot, right? If you start the earliest part of the supply chain, I'd say getting low carbon cold chains is a big deal, right? And there should be a big push of driving subsidies, driving investment, et cetera, on low carbon distributed cold chains. That's how we're going to deal with a lot of on-farm and near-farm food losses in parts of the planet. At the other end of the chain, policies that encourage things like food banking, right? I'm not just saying that because I'm in this meeting here, but it's true, right? That is a large buckshot is getting food through food banks, right? And there's a number of policies you can put in place to actually do that. So there are some larger than average buckshot in this solution. But also, too, finally, I'll end with my mantra of target, measure, act. That's the one that we've kind of settled on. Whether you're a government, whether you're a company, whether you're an NGO, if you set a target to reduce your food loss and waste, target set ambition motivates action, right? You measure. What gets measured gets managed, right? And it's amazing. Everyone we've ever worked with, when you ask them up front, do you lose a lot of food? There's a lot of food loss waste. Oh, no. And even my household was that way. And then we actually just do a simple measurement. The 100% reaction is, oh my goodness, I didn't realize I threw away or wasted that amount. Wow, okay, I better do something about it. And then take action. There's lots of things out there, from technologies to do simple changes in practices. I think it's incumbent upon us as a community to be getting that message across.
Craig, I want to stay with you 1 minute more. So when you talk about sort of solutions like low carbon cold chains, it's not real sexy to policymakers. How do we make that cool for them to want to invest in?
So I think you've got to meet a policymaker where they are, then take them where you want to go. So take any country in, let's say in Africa or South Asia, if you're, as a policymaker, you're interested in jobs and energy security, you sell low carbon food cold chains as a jobs creation act, as a energy security act for the, that also actually helps reduce food loss and food waste, right? So I do think the answer, my pitch would be different based upon the circumstance.
Yeah.
But again, we've got to get clever about who the decision maker is, what rings their bell, and then you got to meet them at that, then take them to our solutions.
Thank you so much, Craig. Christy, I want to turn to you. Philanthropy has obviously been key in raising awareness about food loss and food waste. I want you to talk a little bit about that first, and then I'll follow up with a question about policy. So why has your foundation been so intent on making sure that people know about this issue, that they understand it, that they know you're supporting it?
Thank you so much, Danny. And I want to congratulate my panelists and many people in this room who've been working on the food loss and waste issue for many, many years. The Robertson Foundation is actually brand new to this issue, so we're at that sort of dangerous spot of kind of learned enough to think we know what we're talking about, but not to really have any experience to understand what really works and what doesn't. And Danny, the previous question you asked Craig was about, why has food loss and waste not gotten the attention that it deserves on the, national and international stages? And I think one reason is that philanthropy has not funded this issue to scale at all. And I think it's because of the reasons that Craig described. You look at food loss and waste and you see so many different intervention points in so many different geographic locations. And as a philanthropist that likes to pull big levers, it's hard to think about how you do that with food loss and waste. And so to that end, the Robertson Foundation partnered with a number of organizations in this room, a number of other philanthropies, including Bezos Earth Fund, IKEA Foundation, Betsy and Jesse Fink Foundation, Susan Bell and Associates, ReFed, RAP, FOLU, WRI, and a bunch of other organizations, including the Global Food Banking Network.
Everyone in this room.
Pretty much, to produce the philanthropic roadmap for food loss and waste. And if you would like a copy of it, we didn't print them out. You're welcome, because nobody wants to carry these home on the plane. But there's cards in the back of the room. There's a QR code that you can scan to get access to the electronic document. And really what this does is outline $300 million in investable opportunities right now throughout the globe and in 7 key countries that can be done now to reduce food loss and waste and to cut down some of that 10% of global climate emissions that come from food loss and waste. And the countries in the roadmap include Kenya, South Africa, Indonesia, China, Mexico, Brazil, and the United States. But the lessons in each of the country roadmaps are applicable to a number of other countries as well.
Can you give some concrete examples? I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of these stories out of Kenya or South Africa or elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the, one of the sort of global pieces that is missing is really this coordination mechanism. What we're seeing in food loss and waste is there are a ton of bright spots out there in countries like Mexico, which we'll hear about after this, the work that BAMX is doing, in countries like the UK that has, with a partnership with RAP, has reduced food loss and waste by 30%. And the question is kind of how do you take those success stories and scale them so that they're, able to be done in multiple locations. And,
right.
and some of those are, policy interventions like organic landfill bans. Those are some of the things we're looking at.
Well, and I guess my question is, how does philanthropy influence policy in a way that is useful and impactful?
Well, sometimes we don't, but, so one thing that we at the Robertson Foundation are really interested in are focusing specifically on the climate emissions from food loss and waste. And so what the research is showing is that a lot of the climate emissions coming from food loss and waste are from the meat and dairy sectors. And so the questions that we have are, what are the policies that can be put in place to reduce food loss and waste from the meat and dairy sectors first, if we want to have the most climate impact? And those are things like, standardizing date labeling on milk, changing the way, especially in the United States, that meat and dairy are subsidized to be provided in school lunches, that kind of thing. And if folks in this room have ideas about other ways to reduce food loss and waste from the meat and dairy sector, we would love to hear it. It's an area that has not traditionally been funded well, and we're very open to new ideas about it.
Thank you so much, Christy. I have one final question for you all before we turn to Q&A. I'm wondering if you can all talk about how the COP28 presidency making food systems a priority this year sort of will impact global action on food loss and food waste. And Christy, you're nodding, so you can go first.
Well, I mean, one thing that, I take heart in is the Emirates Declaration on, sustainable agriculture, resilient food, and climate action.
Nice
job. Mentions food loss and waste twice. Do I have that right? 2 different times, and has 134 signatories and potentially more on the way. So, and y'all can tell me better how this works, but it feels like that is sort of a first step to raising awareness in order to eventually get food loss and waste into more NDCs.
Thank you so much. Craig, are you hopeful about this greater attention?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to look at COPs, just step back and realize what's the purpose of COPs on these items here, right? And if you look back, the first 10 COPs, more or less, the focus was very much on energy, right? Then all of a sudden, the Bali COP came along, and Indonesia really pushed tropical forests, and in our community pushed tropical forests. All of a sudden, forests got on the agenda, right? And then now you can't go to any one of these without forests, and we see it on the news every single day, right? We have to look at Dubai as the same moment for this, right? And there was a false start last year. There's bubblings of it back in Glasgow. We've now broken through. Yeah. It'll continue. As long as we're still here, we're going to continue pushing it. So I see it as an evolution. So it's a fantastic step. It's a needed step. It happened too late, but you know we are where we are.
Sure.
So now we have to take advantage of it.
Thank you. Schengen.
Yeah, well, I'm very proud because I'm part of the reference group to advise the UAE government. There is a sentence on their Declaration of Food and Agriculture to reduce food waste and loss. So we should congratulate. We should thank the leadership of the UAE. I mean, this is the key milestone. I really hope after this event, I'm pretty sure Brazil will take it on. Food, agriculture, sustainability, I have already engaged with them. We must continue the momentum. But I also think, the COP is COP. We must do it from our own sort of day-to-day activity to reduce food waste loss. Coming back to China, I have launched a research project to look at the students' food waste in the university cafeteria. Beijing University, Tsinghua University, Renmin University, my university, there's a key university in China. We look at why students waste so much food. One is they don't appreciate food. Mm-hmm. The second is the food environment. It's just not very sort of conducive to them.
Right.
And also, the portion is simply too big. There's no small portion, big, medium, and for female students, they will not be able to consume this big bowl of noodles. So they waste 2/3. So we are working on behavior, food environment, and policies to reduce food waste in the Chinese university cafeteria. And I think this will be, in addition to cafeteria, university cafeteria, but also work units, China called work units, the state-owned enterprises. They probably eat more than half, maybe even 2/3 of their meals in this institutional restaurants. So,
Sure, go ahead.
So just what the lesson from that is, if you're having lunch here with Sheng at any point in time, make sure you eat all your food because he's watching.
but also nutrition is healthier.
Thank you so much. You can hold on to that. We have time for one question from the audience. Right there in the back, you raised your hand first. Go ahead.
Oh, you asked a question.
Hi, I'm Yobel from Global Alliance for Incineratable Alternatives. We are working with 1,000 grassroots organizations individual globally on tackling waste, plastic, and also now food waste. And one of the report that we made in 2021 is on NDCs, and we found out in our scorecard that only 35 countries propose a better separate collection system for organic waste and or composting. Some mention food loss, but then it's not embedded in the matrix that is mandatory to be complied. And it seems that when we talk with our members, there's a lot of issues when working with different government systems. In a sense, like governance in different sectors, they have their own focus, and it's not integrated. So knowing all this fact, what do you propose to make a faster change on the field, knowing the complexities? Thank you.
Who wants to take that on? Craig?
So we actually held, with our Champions 12.3 Coalition, we held a session with NDC Partnership this summer on this very issue. And I think one of the ideas that came out of this was that wouldn't it be great if we actually had some off-the-shelf language on food losses or food waste or both, that the experts say, yeah, this'll really get things going, that then countries can then just take and put into their NDCs. We gotta make it easy for them. We have to realize these folks making the NDCs have a day job, they're doing tons of stuff.
Yeah.
So let us as a community make it easy for them, and then things will move on from there.
That's such a great suggestion. Thank you so much. I want to thank our first round of panelists. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you all so much. We're going to move to part 2. So I'd like to invite Mariana, Fabrice, and Amanda to join me on stage. Great, thank you so much. So I want to introduce Mariana Jimenez, the director of the Mexican Food Banking Network. Give her a round of applause, please. Fabrice Salamanca, the Vice President of Global Public Affairs at Danone. Round of applause, everyone. Let's keep this energy going. And we have Amanda McKee, the Director of Knowledge and Learning at the NDC Partnership. So thank you all for being here. I want to get started. Amanda, I want to hear from you first. We heard from speakers on the last panel about what we need to see at the global level. As we move to national and subnational considerations, what do we need to think about, and what do countries need to prioritize?
So first of all, thank you, and thanks to Craig for saying half of what I planned to say already. So I feel like my job is easy. But actually, when invited to this panel, I was thinking, should I speak on the global or should I speak at the country? And I think actually having Craig speak first helps, because what I want to share is what we're seeing in country right now, and a lot of the ideas, a lot of the concerns where we need to be, really echo some of the challenges we see in countries. So through the NDC partnership, we support our developing country members to update, to implement, to finance their NDCs. And if we look specifically at how food loss and waste falls into those requests, we have just about 6,000 individual requests that 90 countries have submitted to the partnership. 7% of them relate to waste, and that's waste broadly, right? Everything. If you look specifically at waste and food systems, 11 requests. So 11 out of 6,000. So that gives you a sense of where this is in terms of on the agenda of ministries of environment on their implementation.
Okay.
There's an opportunity, though, because if we look more broadly at waste in agriculture, there's a lot more. What happens, though, is bringing that down to the actual food systems and the food loss. So there's appetite for it, but it's an opportunity for us in the next round of updates to both signal to countries what the opportunities are, and I'm hopeful we'll hear some of that on this panel, but also signaling to countries that there's support available out there, because through the partnership, through a lot of members that are in the room today, there's support to enable them, to guide them through this journey. And so part of what we see as imperative is not just telling them what they need to do, because we don't do that, but really giving them to confidence to do what they need to do. So to me, that's the biggest opportunity that we have, is to link those two so that as the next NDC update round comes, countries have this on their mind and feel confident to include it in their NDC.
That's really important. You also talked about the need for finance to implement these NDCs. How does that work with the work you're doing?
Yeah, well, that's an even more complicated and maybe an even longer answer, but maybe to give you maybe the short version of that, we see it as all integrated. And so we're having countries, when they come to us for requests on updating their NDC, to already be thinking about what does your implementation look like and what are the financing needs around that. And a big part of that is actually ensuring that the right people are around the table from the beginning.
Okay.
And so we're not just putting together an NDC document and waving it around and then saying, oh great, now how do we implement it? But actually encouraging the different actors to be part of that process from the beginning. And that includes all of the financial community. And the different actors, all the way down to smallholder farmers who are involved, to the local actors. We're doing a lot more work with cities, for instance, especially coming out of this COP with CHAMP. So this is a really big opportunity for us to link some of these agendas and see how we share it, or we move it from the planning all the way through to the financing.
That's fantastic news. Thanks for explaining all that. I really appreciate it. Mariana, I want to turn to you and sort of talk, zero in on what's happening in Mexico. The Mexican Food Banking Network, BAMSC, right, is the first organization in the world to earn carbon credits for rescuing food, which is so exciting. Congratulations. Can you describe how that works?
Yes. First, I want to tell a little bit about what we do in BAMX in order to tackle both food loss and waste and food insecurity. The Mexican Food Banking Network is an NGO comprised of 57 food banks. We have presence in 30 of the 32 states in Mexico, and by now we're recovering around 150 million kilos of suitable for human consumption food from companies that are social responsible, such as Danone, Nestle, Kellogg, and lots of them. And with this food and our distribution model, we are now serving around 1.8 million people in food insecurity. So that is huge, and we are not only having a social impact, but also we now know that BAMX has an important environmental impact. So that is when we partnered with Core Zero last year, and we went through an exhausting auditing process with other 3 organizations. And in January of this year, we managed to enter into the voluntary market, and our stock was of more than 220,000 carbon credits because of the mitigating emissions of 220,000 tons of CO2 in 1.5 years. And our stock is all sold out by October 2023, and we are now in the process of certifying our next carbon credits. So that is how we are working in the carbon market.
That's fantastic. That took many years, though, to come about, I imagine. That took a long time to come about.
And we are learning. I mean, we as food bankers, we're not like experts in all of this.
Right.
That's why we have a partner that is helping us going through this whole process. We were more focused on the social impact that we have of the local interventions, but now we know that we have an enormous impact in climate change.
And do you think this is a model that other countries can follow?
Yes, absolutely, because we do know that one of the main struggles and challenges that we have as food banks is finance, financial support, and through these strategies we can earn money, and we can diversify our income by having these financial instruments that can help us continue rescuing food of all the opportunity that is in Mexico.
It becomes less of a charity model and more of a self-sustaining model.
Absolutely.
It's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Fabrice, I do want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the private sector's role in all this. Just as we talked about philanthropy before, philanthropy can't do it alone, the private sector can't do it alone, but there are many things that you can do. And I just want to talk a little bit about what's happening in the EU. Danone is trying to cut some of the confusion around date labeling, and I'm wondering if you can explain a little bit about that. But first, talk about why date labeling is important.
Yes, thank you for the invitation. Very glad to be here. Yes, let me start on how we are tackling the food loss and waste topic in Danone. We started 2 decades ago partnering with local food banks, and we started because it was anchored to our mission: bring food and health through as many people as possible. And you cannot do it if you are losing food, no? The food that you produce. And this is important because we started partnering, but in a very general commitment. And then because of the food sustainability topic accelerate worldwide, we start thinking what's in for us in terms of the sustainability of the food systems. And for me, we're facing right now in Dubai a tipping point regarding not only the understanding of the sustainability topic related to food system, but how we are going to achieve sustainable food system if we don't tackle the food waste and loss. It's impossible to do it, right? So we started thinking about a strategy anchored to our sustainability commitments. So we make an agreement with the Global Food Banking Network in 2020 to go from 12 countries to 40 countries and to link all our distribution and production sites with the food bankings that operates locally. But mainly also, we are partners in the Global Methane Hub. And this is very important because we can valorize what we are doing to recover and to reduce the food waste and food losses, and to valorize it not only as a system, but also through the communication to consumers. So taking your question, we partner with some key stakeholders in Europe, taking into account that the European regulations allows the before date approach, no? So we started communicating to consumers how to choose from their refrigerators, no, the products that are fine to be consumed. So we started a campaign called Too Good to Be LED. And this is important because we knew for a fact that 10% of the food waste in Europe is led by the expiry date or the labeling information. So we wanted to change that. So we embark telling consumers to use their senses, look, smell, and taste the products, because most of the products can be consumed safely. So this changed 66% of the consumer's behavior, which is huge. It's 2/3 that they change, no, the perception they have related to the safety of the food because of this campaign. So there's a lot to do related to consumer behaviors.
Sure. On that final point about helping eaters, consumers learn to trust their sentences, they've had, many, many years of being told that they should follow the date labels. Can you talk about that process where they should now follow their own common sense?
For me, it's a cultural change process, and if we see, we just heard about the cafeterias, no, in the university and schools, but it's the same thing in the restaurants or when we order in Uber Eats food. People think that because they bought their food and they are the owners of the food, they can waste it. And that's a really tough topic because we need to find also the right incentives to penalize it. And to penalize it in a restaurant. You don't eat your food and you don't have your doggy bag to keep it with yourself and bring it home. You are going to be charged because you are producing food waste. And there are ways to do it. But it's very important to achieve a cultural change. And the cultural change needs to be clear in terms that the food waste is not only bad for your pocket or no, for your economy, it's bad for the planet, it's bad for the climate, it's bad for achieving sustainable food systems. So it's very important how to tackle consumer behaviors. So what we're doing now is how to valorize it with the retailers. The retailers are the right partners in our case. No, we are a fast-moving consumer goods company related to food and beverages. So we know for sure that the retailers that want to move this topic. So to give you an example, we partner with Carrefour in Argentina in the stores in Buenos Aires, no, to do a big campaign regarding food waste, and we achieve increasing the collection of the food that we were doing there, and we are going to this pilot program to expand it to all the province of Buenos Aires. So the right way is building labs wherever you can to see what is the key message to change the consumer's behavior.
Thank you, Fabrice. Amanda and Mariana, what I've been hearing from Fabrice is that partnerships are key to the work that Danone does, but it's also key for the work that you're both doing. And so I'm sort of wondering if you can talk more about the partnerships that each of you have engaged in to further this work.
Sure, and this is really core to what the NDC partnership is. The recognition really behind the partnership is that we wanted to give voice to developing countries. And so have them be the ones to dictate what it is that they want to do in their nationally determined contribution. So really reinforcing that idea that it's nationally determined. At the same time, recognizing that there's a lot of different partners out there who are providing support and often coming and approaching government focal points in parallel. So coming and sharing their ideas, promoting their programs or projects, and often overlapping in terms of their objectives. And so what we really try to do is, first of all, put governments in the driving seat. So we work with them to develop NDC action plans. These are essentially implementation plans that are meant to be whole of government approaches. So working with Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Energy, everyone to understand from the NDC, what are the outcomes that we're looking to achieve, what are the outputs, and then down to the individual activities so that our members and partners can come to the country, see this plan, and see how they can fit in. It's not meant to be a one-way street. We engage partners from the very beginning, and so I think that's also a critical part of what we've been discussing is countries don't know what they don't know. And so feeding into that process so that this is actually a part of the NDC update process, it's part of the implementation plan. But that to us is the key part of the partnership, really bringing everyone together, but being led by the country.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Mariana.
Yes, I believe that for BAMEX, one of our main mantras is policy, investment, and collaboration. And one of our main collaborations right now is not only the collaboration that we have with our partners from the industry, from the field, from retail, from hotels and restaurants, but also we are bringing together a strategy alongside with RAP, that is the voluntary agreements that we have baptized in Mexico as Pacto por la Comida, which is an extraordinary strategy to add value, add more value to what we're doing with our partners, because we're helping them to identify all the opportunities that they are in their value chain to prevent food loss and waste and to prevent those surpluses, but also to identify that the best way to prevent food waste once the surpluses have occurred is through food donation in order to reduce not only climate change, but also hunger in our country. And we have great outcomes of the voluntary agreement right now. We are finishing our first change behavior campaign that has been quite a success. And also next year, we are beginning to focus also in children, because we believe that children must not normalize food waste.
Right.
So we are partnering also with Kitsania in Mexico, and our 58th food bank is going to be in Kitsania for children.
Congratulations, that's awesome. I think my final question for you all as we sort of wrap up is, what is your call to action for this COP?
For me, it's we need to change the culture regarding food waste, and it's a change of mindset, and we need to start because we are starting late, really late, and this is something that has not been discussed properly, because this is a big problem regarding the sustainability for the planet and the climate change, for sure. And I wanted to mention an example that is really inspiring, when you can partner with the whole of your value chain. We have a brand in the US, a yogurt brand, Too Good. It's a Greek yogurt. And we partner with a local NGO who works with farmers, fruit farmers. And from the ingredients, we start buying ingredients that were not perfect, no, that were a surplus of the production, etc., to put it in the product. And then we valorize those products because it was certified that we prevent a loss, and we label it to consumers. And the consumers contribute buying this product to food banks, where we have our headquarters in the US, in Denver, Colorado, and in New York. And you have also that you are supporting the food banks there, no? So it was a complete circle, virtuous circle, and this is the way to make consumers inspired to do something.
Sure.
So for me, we need to create as many labs where there is food loss to change the habits, to change the consumer's behavior. So that's for me the call to action.
Thank you so much. Mariana, what's your call to action?
Right now we are really interested in having our government participating and collaborating with us through the voluntary agreement because right now the conditions in Mexico in terms of collaboration with the government and NGOs are not the best. And we believe that they need to be in the collaboration with food banks because of the great impact in the short term we have in order to tackle food loss and waste and food insecurity. Also, we need investment. Right now, we are only recovering 0.8% about all the food that is being wasted in Mexico, while more than 40 million people suffer from food insecurity. So the main issues that we have is logistics. In Mexico, the problem is not about scarcity, but it's about logistics and about the lack of financial support. And right now we need this financial support for research, for technology and innovation, for logistics, for infrastructure, for cold chain. So that's my call to action because we have a great impact and there's a lot to be done in Mexico.
Thank you so much. Amanda, final word.
Great. So I'll take it up to the global level where we started. And to me, the call to action is to really leverage what was discussed on the first panel. I'm not going to repeat the full name of the Emiratis Declaration, but that's it. And like Craig said, this is the food moment. This is the COP where this is getting the priority, getting the visibility. And I think the call to action is to really seize that moment and make sure that we're stepping up and supporting countries because the next 2 years is when it's going to happen. This is the opportunity to make it into the NDCs, and that's going to be the hook to get that investment that's needed to see that forward.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We have time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Not the same person who asked before. You right in the middle.
Thank you. Thank you, the panelists, the first and the second panelists. My name is Nachijoba Irene. I come from Uganda. I'm a small-scale farmer. Thank you for the presentation. This is the moment. This is the food moment. And the call, take back home is creating awareness. I've realized that where I come from, food is wasted. We have a lot of food, but we are crying for food insecurity. In the other parts have a lot of food. In my country, other parts are crying and people are dying of food, hunger. So the question is, or a take home, what are we going to do to see that we produce food and not wasted? Because not only food wasted in eating only, but in production. Because we produce food and fresh food, except cereals, but fresh food like banana, like potatoes, like pumpkins in our area, we lack preservative measures, we lack machines for drying, we lack in rural areas because some areas don't have electricity. So I see a lot of food wasted in the markets. It is going bad, and also we throw it, and also we can make some manures, but not on large extent. So there's a question of what to do. Collaboration, supporting, partnership, and funding. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yes, give her a round of applause, please. I think that question of infrastructure, and maybe the first panel, if you have any thoughts on this too, can answer. I think that question of infrastructure is really key to all this. How do we have the mechanisms in place so that farmers aren't losing the valuable food that they're producing? Shengen, do you want to?
Yeah, it's clear the government has to invest in roads, in electricity, make sure that the farmer produce can be transported to markets. I was in DRC, there's Congo, Uganda. The farmers can produce bumper crops, whether it's cassava or plantains in Uganda, but they couldn't transport them out because bad roads. They still use bicycles to transport huge amount of plantains. So this is the government's job. It's not the private sector can help, but that's top priority of the government to fix the infrastructure, electricity, roads, and probably even beyond.
Thank you so much. Anyone else want to answer? No, we're good. All right, time for one more question. Right there in the back.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Tilahun. I work for Agra. I think most of the global discussion is on food loss after harvest. You know, and in small scale holdings, a lot of loss is happening before harvest. And partly, aggravated by climate change, untimely rain, lack of, infrastructure, but also lack of emphasis. So I think how do we integrate this pre and post harvest so that this food loss and waste is not really considered in a very narrow lens, rather in a broader setting? Thank you.
Anyone want to take that on?
Yeah, I think the pre-production, actually, you lost quite a food already in your field. Partly because maybe floods, maybe partly because of diseases, partly because of food safety issues, right? Because food could be rotten, so they're actually CGIAR, CGIAR very well. They are doing that to make sure that the crop straw is shorter, so then it will not be easily fall if there's rain, if there's wind, and also resist pests. So yeah, absolutely. In fact, in China, I don't know the figure in other countries, even in the field, we already lose 5 to 10% of food. So it's a serious problem. Even before you harvest, it's already lost. So I think research must tackle that.
Great. Craig, what's there? Great.
Just on this here, very good question. There are a lot of on-farm and near-farm losses happening. And so one thing that we're starting to do is engage some of the major farm gate-facing agriculture companies, the companies that actually will go to the farms and buy the rice, the plantains, whatever it is, and get embedded into their engagement programs, their corporate extension services, not just how do you boost yields, which has been the focus for the past 40, 50 years, but also how do you actually maximize the harvest so that there's not stuff left on the ground, left on the tree, you name it, right? So trying to build in avoided food losses into the extension services that the companies actually provide, because the companies actually have that touch point. So let's maximize that touch point.
Thank you so much, Craig. I think we need to give this panel a round of applause. They've been great. And I will turn it back to Lisa Moon from the Global Food Banking Network.
So thank you so much, Danny, to all of our panelists, both in the first and second session. And Danny, I just want to say also thank you to you. For years, you have inspired me and so many people to be amplifying the voices of people doing work on the ground and have all of these solutions. So we just really appreciate your engagement as that. Let's give one more round of applause. Okay, so this concludes this session. We are going to take a 30-minute break, and we will be back at 12:30 with FOLU, and the title of that session will be Food Loss and Waste Speed Dating for SDG 12.3, How Philanthropy Can Catalyze National Action on Food Loss and Waste. And I just want to put in a special note that these last two questions I thought were so critical and important. We are going to be talking about this issue specifically tonight from 5 to 6 p.m. in this room. Thank you all for joining us. We hope we'll see you later today.